I have some sad news to report. Vladimir showed the video that I made about the results of the Russian parliament being 70%, and all the Russians, he showed it on the Russian emergency broadcast system, and all of the Russians were so excited about that and demanding that the Jesuits, that they should not have been allowed to vote in the election, and they were supporting me and making parades. And the Jesuits retaliated when my men, which was Matthew McConaughey, Gerard Butler, Hugh Jackman, Brent Spiner, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-il, were walking in Las Vegas to go to a McDonald's, and then a Jesuit vehicle came by them in a... I was speaking with Judge Terrance Jenkins, and he told me this on Skype. Came by them in a... it was a big black vehicle. It was... what do you call that? It was like a black limousine. And used a taser net to shock them all, and then carried them away in a car. They believed to a San Francisco Jesuit homosexual compound. It was I'm trying to read my notes here. Oh, it was an H2 Hummer black limousine that they went off in after they tasered them all, and they think that they took them to San Francisco. And they put him in an all rainbow-colored room and did bukkake on all the men. And it was like there were about 1,000 men there. And bukkake is where they ejaculate their semen onto the men. And they actually injected their penises into the mouth of each of these men, about 200 men per man. In other words, like, they gave Matthew McConaughey the AIDS virus, and they thrust their penises into each of these men's mouth, about 200 Jesuits per man. So like 200 Jesuits thrust their penises into Matthew McConaughey's mouth and ejaculated in him so much that he was choking, he couldn't breathe. And they wouldn't let Matthew McConaughey breathe. That's what they did to Matthew McConaughey, and they gave Matthew McConaughey the AIDS virus. We've got our nanotechnology research team working on this right now to see if we can. We do have the cure for the AIDS virus, but we're just not sure what else they might have given them. For Brent Spiner, they stuck a football in his rear, his anus, and it was so bad it ripped his flesh. But all men took Jesuit ejaculation into their mouth, from about 200 Jesuits per man. So all of these men had to put up with Jesuits thrusting their penises into their mouth, and they ejaculated into each man, and they were choking on this stuff. There were about 1,000 Jesuit homosexuals who did this. Then they injected drugs into Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-il and told them that these drugs would make them think they were making love to me, Gail. And after they put the drugs into Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-il and Vladimir Putin started making homosexual love to each other. The drugs apparently had some sort of mind control technology, and it made Vladimir and Kim Jong-il think they were making love to me. And when Vladimir tried to resist, they would jerk his neck and stab another needle into his neck and put more mind control drugs into him. And Terrance Jenkins, they made him watch the whole thing. And while Terrance was watching, they were poking fun at him, saying that we're not going to make you go through this because you've never had brain-to-brain sex with Gail, and so you're less of a threat. And we know she isn't going to have... They were tormenting him, claiming that I would never make brain-to-brain love with Terrance Jenkins, I guess because they say because he's black. The reason I won't make brain-to-brain love with Terrance Jenkins is because he's a judge. And if I do that, then it will invalidate him as a judge. We will not be able to use him as judge in our legal cases, because they will say that he's emotionally connected to me and therefore not impartial. That's the reason I won't make love to him, brain to brain. with Gerard Butler. They made him dress like a little girl, and they were sticking their penises into his mouth and into his butt, his anus at the same time. About 200 Jesuits did this to him. Each man had to take the ejaculation from about 200 Jesuits. For Hugh Jackman, they were the worst of all because he was resisting more than any of the others. And a big black Jesuit named Bubba made Hugh Jackman lick Bubba's butthole. And then this black Jesuit named Bubba pooped on Hugh Jackman. Then they put Vladimir Putin in a tank with a dolphin, and Vladimir ended up having sex with 2 dolphins. This is Jesuit brain control technology. Vladimir Putin is not like this. So if they start going public with this, I am outraged by this. I have absolute faith in Vladimir Putin, Matthew McConaughey, Hugh Jackman, Terrence Jenkins, Brent Spiner, Gerard Butler, and I know that this is not totally out of character for these men. They were raped. And I demand that these Jesuits who did this to these men be executed. They have a military homosexual compound in San Francisco. We appeal to the UN to allow us to use a chemical weapon that would only target the Jesuits, the gay Jesuits. It won't kill anybody else. We want permission to use this on the Jesuit compound to execute these Jesuits who did this to these men. For Terrence Jenkins, they made him take bukkake, which is bukkake's when they ejaculate their semen onto these men over their face and over their body, and apparently they thrust their penises into their mouth and made them take it that way. And these men were choking on the ejaculation. Terrence Jenkins said that he got so much Jesuit ejaculation in his throat that his throat was itching terribly. Right now, our nanotechnology doctors, all these men are laying in bed, and our nanotechnology doctors are seeing each of them to try to determine the best course of treatment to fix what the Jesuits did to them. They slapped Terrence Jenkins in the face, and they made him watch the whole thing. The United Nations claims that they can't destroy this gay compound, this gay Jesuit compound in San Francisco because it's anti-homosexual. Therefore, I happen to work with some homosexuals at my job, and I happen to know that not all homosexuals are like this. I appeal to the homosexual community out there. Demand the execution of these Jesuits. These homosexual Jesuits, you demand it. The homosexuals themselves. Demand the execution of these Jesuits for humiliating Vladimir Putin, giving Matthew McConaughey the AIDS virus, and God knows what else they might have, for raping Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-il, Brent Spiner, Matthew McConaughey, Gerard Butler, and Hugh Jackman. This was rape. I want the homosexual community to help us out. Demand that these Jesuits in the San Francisco Jesuit military compound be executed, and that the United Nations will give us permission to destroy this gay Jesuit military compound in San Francisco. Homosexuals, unite with us in our war against the Jesuits. I do not consider my greatest enemy the homosexual community. My greatest enemy is the Jesuit order. And I'm asking the homosexuals out there who've heard what I just described, what these Jesuit homosexuals did to these men, that you unite with me in outrage against what these Jesuit homosexuals did to Brent Spiner, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-il, Matthew McConaughey, Hugh Jackman, and Gerard Butler. Unite with me and demand the execution of these Jesuits at the San Francisco military compound. That the United Nations will give us permission to use this chemical weapon and execute these Jesuits for what they did. And I ask the world to pray for these men because they were raped. Pray that we can get them back to health, that Matthew McConaughey will be cured of the AIDS virus that they just gave him, and that we can protect our men from having to undergo something like this again. Unfortunately, because of incidents like this, it appears that my men will never be able to go from place to place in a normal manner, that they can only transport from one place to another using transporter technology because it appears the Jesuits can get them. any other way. So, homosexuals out there, I am not against the homosexual community, even though I'm a Bible-believing Christian, and I don't believe that homosexuality is condoned in the Bible. I do not consider my main enemy the homosexuals. I consider my main enemy the Jesuit order. And I know there are some homosexuals out there that will be outraged by this. Unite with me in demanding that these Jesuit homosexuals be executed, and that the United Nations will give us permission to execute these Jesuits. And I gotta tell you something. When the Jesuits set up their concentration camps in Nazi Germany, guess who went in there? Some homosexuals. So these Jesuits are very dangerous people, and they need to go. And I've just described to you what they did to these men. Right now, these poor men are suffering, and they're humiliated. And they had to, each of these men had to take about 200 Jesuit penises with the ejaculation into their mouth. Some of them were drowning in ejaculation. Matthew McConaughey was literally choking on it. Let me see if I've covered everything. There were 1,000 Jesuit homosexuals that did this, bukkake on my men. And it's disgusting. Right now, my men are staying at the Church of Gail, which is transporting one place to another, so that the Jesuits can't get a lock on their location and bomb the church. But my men have all just suffered an unbearable humiliation today, as well as discomfort from having to. They were all raped. These homosexual Jesuits raped them all. The Jesuits did this to retaliate because I told the truth that the United Russia Party in Russia had a 70% victory because we would not allow the Jesuits to vote in Russia. And the Jesuits controlled the news media and lied and said that the United Russia Party had less than 50% support. So the Russians were rallying behind me and Vladimir Putin and demanding that the Jesuits be ousted from Russia. And the Jesuits retaliated by doing this to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-il. See, because Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-il, I got a message from Kim Jong-il.